Hi, everyone. This is episode 78. I'm Dan Prosser, joined as ever by Andrew Frankel. Now, Andrew, we're doing one of those podcasts where we talk about lots of different bits and pieces because there's been plenty happening. It's Monday morning as we record this after the Russian Grand Prix. What a blinding race that was. And another sort of chapter in this spectacular 2021 season that we're having. I can't remember enjoying F1 as much as I am this season.
No, I mean, it's like all those rubbish seasons. It's like kind of like payback for all of it. It's like, the gods have just sort of said, okay, guys, we realize you've had it a bit, a bit raw. So we're going to just chuck everything at you. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, I was quite literally on the edge of the sofa shouting at the screen in the last two laps because, I mean, I was absolutely certain the moment that Lewis ducked into the pits that race was Lando's because Crofty or somebody in commentary said he can lose 6 seconds a lap and still win this race. So I thought, it's done it. Mercedes have just completely arsed it up and they've given Lando the win. And I was just so happy. And then, oh dear, it was awful to. I mean, I say it was awful. I'm very happy that Lewis won, and massive congratulations to him on his 100th. But I'm afraid every atom in my body was rooting for Lando, and it was just so. Oh, it was just soul destroying, wasn't it?
Even when Lewis was having his old slicks replaced with Inters, he was saying it stopped raining, and his team came on and said, there's more coming. So it was such a touch and go decision. And less than that, 30 seconds later, there's a shot looking down a long straight. And it was just a deluge. It was chucking it down. And as soon as you saw that shot, you just knew that Lewis had it. He also had a sort of 50 second gap behind him. I had no idea how they managed to pull that out between them, but yeah.
I just lost track.
Yeah.
I mean, how did Max end up at second?
Yeah, that's the other thing I want to talk about is it was a chaotic, frenetic race, particularly over the last few laps. Max started right at the back. Lewis got swamped at the start because he was being very cautious. And yet, who is it that comes out on top first and second? It's Lewis and Max.
You see, now, the question you should ask me now is, has anyone ever actually won a race from the back of the grid? And the answer to that is, I don't know.
I think they have.
And I should. But who and where and when?
I feel like Kimi did it. How do I Google this?
I know that John Watson did something absolutely amazing back in it'll be late 70s or early 80s. He came from have you got it?
Well, I found an article entitled 5 drivers who won from the back of the grid.
Is it all in Formula One? I just want people listening to this to know the intensive research that we do before we go into these podcasts.
Okay.
It's not like we just sort of make them up on the spot. Sorry, go on.
Michael Schumacher, Belgian Grand Prix 1995. He started 16th.
That doesn't sound like the back of the grid to me.
Well, it doesn't, does it? But
hang on, I can look it up. That I can look up in my.
Okay. The trouble is, I don't know how much I can trust this website.
Okay. So the Grand Prix data book, believe me, you can trust. Isn't this a fascinating podcast?
Maybe
Michael from 16th. Yeah. So he definitely. Well, there were at least 24 cars on the grid for that. So forget that.
Okay. No, fine.
Aki Inui was in that.
Okay. So these are just drivers who won from way down.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I want to know if anyone won from last on the grid. Has anyone ever done last to first?
It doesn't seem like they have, does it?
Yeah, I don't think so, but I might be wrong.
See, they're confusing us with all this. Okay, well there we go. We'll have to do a little bit of research into that later on, won't we? Maybe that's an Instagram post. Has any F1 driver ever won from the very back of the grid? So I'm amazed that with everything that's going on this season, it's Lewis and Max always there and also coming together, coming out of the pits and ending up on top of one another. They're just inseparable.
Literally.
Yeah, they are inseparable. And I think it just speaks to how intense this title battle is during this season.
And after whatever it's been, what's it been? I don't know how many rounds they've been. Sort of, they must be in the teens by now. But they're separated by 2 points. Now, the very interesting thing to me is Andrew Benson, who I think is with Mark Hughes, the best commentator on Formula One, did a piece on the BBC, which is saying, terrific, Lewis won 100, absolutely fantastic. But he actually thinks that Max is the more likely to be champion because, Lewis really did get that win out of, Lewis was, never looked likely to win that race until there were like sort of 2 laps to go. And going forward, the problem is that, the real Mercedes tracks are done now. Interesting. So, yeah. And, so for the last 2, so Sochi and Monza were real Mercedes tracks. And there was a net gain in points to Mercedes, to Lewis of 5.
Yeah, it's not enough, is it?
It's not enough. And so, and I'm sounding like I know what I'm talking about. I'm just literally taking this all from what Benson wrote, but the remaining tracks are all either absolute, touch and go, which stage you probably favor Red Bull because we think they've got the quicker car. Or there's one, Mexico, which apparently Mercedes haven't over Helen. So, the one thing we have learned from the season is you can take nothing for granted, and all predictions tend to go out the window. But sitting here right now, knowing what we know, I think not long ago on this podcast, maybe 4 or 5 podcasts back, you and I were talking about this, and we asked each other who we thought was going to do it. And you said Max, and I said Lewis. I might just be in the Max camp now. I'm not talking about who I want to. I think I'm talking about who I think will. I'm not saying it's Max's to lose by any stretch, but I think, I don't know, it'd be interesting to go on. That's another thing we could do. We could go on, when elections come along, I never listen to watch the polls or anything. I just go on to the bookies because they know. And because it's money. Yeah. And the bookies always tell a completely different story to the polls. And they have a sort of like a vested interest, which sophologists don't. It would be interesting to go, and I'll do it straight after this podcast and see who's odds on to be world champion now. And I bet the money's on Max.
I think it is. I just think ultimately, overall, the Red Bull is quicker. Max is also, he does seem to be on fire at the moment. We're seeing just little silly mistakes from Lewis. But
also Lewis, I'm afraid, is in a one-man team.
He is.
He doesn't have a teammate, effectively.
Well, that's something else to discuss, isn't it? Okay, so all right, I think we're probably agreed now that Max is probably odds on, not least because he's taken his engine penalty. It does seem
well, that's the other thing, and so that's the other thing. You're absolutely right. It seems almost certain that Lewis will have to take one.
There are so many moving parts that it makes it impossible to predict, but it's so hard to know, isn't it? Because all it takes is at the start of a race, someone to pile into the side of Max, and all of a sudden it looks like Lewis's again, doesn't it? So that's why we have to just keep watching.
And at the start of the season, if you have that in one race, well, fine. There are another 20-something races to go. But now there are only 7 races to go, and every one really bloody counts. You can't have a calamity anymore because it's just so much harder. There's so much less time. There's so many fewer races in which to claw back the deficit. It's so exciting. Can we just talk about Lando for a bit?
Let's talk about Lando.
I'll try not to.
But there is a school of thought that says he was hot-headed or petulant or whatever for overruling his engineer.
Somebody, I won't tell you who it is, but somebody got onto my Twitter and saying he was a brat and it was his fault, and shouting "shut up" down the radio was, if that had been Max, he would have been hauled over the coals for it and everything else. And I just think, give the boy a break. I mean, you're out there in the most impossible conditions trying to hold off, a bloke who's won 99 Grand Prix and 7 world championships. You're in a slower car and you've got some bloke, effectively, I don't know, just sort of reading out meaningless data to you. I think it is understandable at the age of 21, if you say whatever you feel needs to be said to get that bloke to be quiet as quickly as humanly possible, because the last thing you need is any kind of distraction. And the other thing I would say, and this person said, Lando lost the race. Well, Lewis didn't want to come in either. Lewis ignored the first instruction to come in. Lewis thought that slicks was the right. Lewis thought exactly the same thing as Lando. The difference was Mercedes overruled Lewis, and McLaren didn't overrule Lando. If Andreas Seidel had got on the blur and said, Lando, you come in this lap or you're out of a job, you'd come in, wouldn't he?
It seems as though Mercedes knew that there was more rain coming, and either they communicated that to Lewis or they just instructed him in no uncertain terms to come in.
Yeah.
It seems as though McLaren left the decision in Lando's hands despite having better information.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And everybody has the same weather radar. I don't think that Mercedes had some great tactical advantage. They just called it better. And and if you think about it, you've got whatever it was, 2-3 laps to go, and you think, well, I'm going to lose 28 seconds or whatever it is in the pit stops, and I'm already 3 seconds. That means I'm going to have to have any chance at all of winning this race, I'm going to have to catch this bloke by 7 or 8 seconds a lap. You'd think, well, that's insane. But actually, it was, as we all know, brilliant with the benefit of hindsight, it was the right thing to do. So, I completely understand why Lando did what he did. I think he was very hard on himself, which is what I also understand. But, there was no attempt by him to sort of say, the team let me down. They should have overruled me. He took it on the chin, and he'll learn from it. But I do think it was an absolutely golden opportunity. And, who knows with this insane season, what's going to happen next, and maybe, where they go next, Turkey, isn't it? Maybe something mad will happen then. But if you just look at things in terms of what is likely to happen, it is likely Lando won't win a race this season now, isn't it?
And he probably knows that.
Yeah.
However, McLaren came within a rain shower of winning back-to-back Grand Prix.
I know. It's
and
great,
both of them, okay, some circumstance, but both would have been on merit, i.e. not just totally mad, chaotic Grand Prix, opportunist wins. They would have been on merit. And
they would. I mean, they did obviously require Max and Lewis to get together in Monza.
Yeah,
for that to be possible.
Daniel was leading, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And yesterday would have absolutely have been on merit. But again, Lando was on pole because quali was wet, I guess.
So some circumstance playing out, but
yeah, and when it's wet quali, it's always the driver who happens to be out when the conditions are optimal who gets pole position. So, I think there are any number of people who will say, well, Danny Rick was lucky to win in Monza and Lando was lucky to be in a position to win in Sochi. But yeah, I mean, that team has just done so well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't the Ferraris up in that position, was it? It wasn't the Aston Martins or the Alpines. It was McLaren. We need to investigate that a little bit. Exactly what have they managed to turn around?
Do you know anybody who might be able to write about something like that for us?
I've got someone on my mind.
Yes,
he was at the Grand Prix.
Karun maybe coming to our assistance there.
Yeah, we'll pass that on to him. Okay, so I also want to talk about Bottas briefly. His blushes were very much spared by that late rain shower because of all the chaos that ensued. He was able to sneak up to, I think, fifth, wasn't it? 5th or 6th. Score some points. A reasonable result.
He was down, but before that, he was like 14th.
My God! And we all saw what Verstappen was able to do, and Bottas was in that Mercedes round. There is the quickest car. It's just full of corners, Sochi, that the Mercedes loves. And he was quicker than anyone throughout Friday practice. Bottas was, and yet he could do nothing. And did you see he didn't even try to defend against Max? No,
I thought that was terrible.
Is that because he's on his way out? I don't know.
Well, it may be that he's completely demotivated. I mean, what Karen says about this is that he's unbelievably quick. He's one of the quickest over a lap. But in a race, certainly compared to Lewis, he just kills his tires. So as you go through a race, his performance relative to Lewis just does that. And you get what you get, don't you? You get what we saw in Sochi. But it's not enough, is it, to be quick over a lap? You might get, as he has done, you might get the odd fastest lap, but on brand new tires, fair enough. But if you win races by being quick over a race, and that is what Lewis has been so supremely good at. It's difficult for Lewis because Perez, I think, is a very solid number 2, and it's not like they're a train out front with everybody else queued up behind, but I think he does his job well. And Lewis just doesn't have that kind of backing. So even when, quite tactically, whatever they say, they stick him down the back with a new power unit, with a job to get in Max's way, hold him up, keep him behind you. And Max just drives straight past him, as he might drive past you or me. That's not doing the job, is it?
No, it wasn't impressive. Okay, well, 100 Grand Prix wins for Lewis Hamilton. He was already out there on his own in terms of race wins, ahead of Michael Schumacher in 91, but 100 Grand Prix wins, just a staggering achievement.
Here's a stat which I've worked out all by myself.
No, I was going to give you this stat.
Okay, go on. You give me the stat. I'll be amazed if it's the same one as I got.
Right, okay.
Go on, off you go.
How many Grand Prix have Brazilians won?
Sorry. I have absolutely no idea. How many Grand Prix have Brazilians won?
106.
Wow. Okay, so that's Ayrton.
Yeah.
Emo.
Yeah. Nelson.
Who else?
Massa. Won a few. I think.
So that's amazing, because we think of that country as being, a fantastic, place for, so Lewis will probably get there, won't he?
It looks like it. We think he's going to do another 2 seasons. He's got every opportunity to get there. However, these statistics are always skewed, aren't they? Because to exceed in these sort of in statistics like that one, you need to be competitive. You need to have been competitive in the modern era, because there are so many more races. Drivers arguably have longer careers. The cars are more reliable. And so what that tells us, really, that statistic, is that apart from Massa, who didn't win the championship, Brazil hasn't had a top draw Grand Prix driver for a long, long time.
No. Okay. Can I give you my stat?
Go on.
And again, this is also large, or partly because there are so many more races. Nevertheless, Lewis has now won more races than Jackie Stewart did Grand Prix.
Of course, because he did 99.
Jackie did 99, of which he won 27. Lewis has won 100. Jackie was in, so I think Jackie's career started in 64, 65. It certainly ended in 73. So Jackie did 9 or 10 seasons. Okay, Lewis is into his 13th, 14th season now. But even so, to have won more races than Jackie Stewart, who is absolutely regarded as one of the finest drivers the sport has ever seen, than Jackie did entire Grand Prix. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Bravo. Congratulations to him. That is some achievement. And more to come, I would have thought. Okay. All right. Well, let's leave the Russian Grand Prix there and talk about a new TI initiative, I suppose, a young writer competition. Now, this is born out of necessity, isn't it? Because we've had 2 young writers on the Intercooler, and they've both been nicked. So we need a new one. Well, do you want to pick up the story then?
Yeah. So this came, didn't it, from when we started the TI app. And if you're not on the app, you probably won't know about this because you won't see any of the stuff that our young writers have written. But when we started the app, we both felt it was incredibly important that one of the things that it should do, probably the most important thing that it would do, would be to bring on new talent. I certainly felt that, I was very lucky. I went to Autocar, which is the greatest training ground. And, I kind of lucked and lied my way into it, but that was 30 something years ago. And, and the world's a very different place. But it's a very hostile environment out there. And, if people like us who are in a position to help don't help, then ultimately what happens is, you don't get the quality of motoring journalists coming through. I mean, there will always be people who do it because there will always be a demand. Let's hope there's always a demand. But we don't want motoring journalists. We want absolutely top class motoring journalists. And, and you don't get that without, frankly, having a place for your words to be published and having people who've done it a bit going through those words and pointing out, how they might be improved. And so we had, our first one was Yusuf Ashraf, absolute lunatic, imported his own Alfa Giulia age 17 from Italy, which was just the sort of thing that we wanted. And he didn't last long at all because, Auto Express saw his talent and, and that was that. That was, bye-bye Yusuf, which, we couldn't have been happier. And then, Charlie Martin came to us. And his progression through us, if people only see the finished product, they haven't seen the amount of times it's sort of been batted back between him and us. But, it's fair to say that his early stuff was very raw. And then by the end of it, he was writing fantastic stuff, which we were proud to publish, not very changed at all. But more than that, he was having really, really good ideas that demonstrated not just his writing talent, but his passion and his knowledge of cars and the sport and everything else. And to the extent that when Haymarket Publishing, which owns What Car, Classic and Sports Car, and our old Gaff Autocar, advertised for a new apprentice, Charlie was able to go to them, show them the body of work that had already been published. Frankly, work that was, was an awful lot better than it would have been if he hadn't been able to be, brought on a bit by some people who've been around. And now he's gone too. He's ended up, and he is now an apprentice at must be the biggest and certainly best publishing, automotive publishing house in the country. And I just know that his career is going to be fantastic because he's got the knowledge and he's got the passion and he's got the talent. And that's what you need. And so, we need another one. But so we put out something on Instagram last week asking for people to send in, people age 21 or less, to send in a 500-word story about anything they liked, as long as it was interesting and automotive and not likely to have been read anywhere else and their work alone. And we've already had a load of entries for it. And one person, because, we're only, basically, TI, as you know, is kind of like you and me and our backer. So we're not in a position to offer anyone a full-time job or even offer them a lot of work. But they will do some stuff for us and we will do for them what we did for Yusuf and for Charlie. And, our fondest hope is that, as soon as whoever this boy or girl comes on board, that, the bigger, wider world who are in a position to provide, a life-changing opportunity for these people, recognize the talent that we're fostering and then nick them again. It's a really weird position to be in, isn't it? Hoping someone comes and steals your stuff. But that's where we are, because that's what it's for. And, I'm just so proud of Yusuf and Charlie, who both listened and learned. And, Charlie's been has been kind enough to write some, very nice stuff for us in his sort of farewell piece. But ultimately, the success is his, and everything he gets will be deserved because, he had the raw material, and then he, through his own efforts and with some guidance from us, but through his own efforts, he crafted it and turned it into stuff that could be published, stuff that could be noticed, stuff that has ultimately, hopefully, as I said, resulted in a life-changing opportunity for him, and that makes us very happy.
Yeah, so the winner of this competition will have their work published on the Intercooler. They get paid for it. And it's, I don't know, I suppose it's sort of up to them how long they're around. Hopefully they'll find a job fairly soon after. It's worked a couple of times already. The window closes in a couple of weeks, so you've got plenty of time to get your entries in. Just send them to info@theintercooler.co.uk and we'll find them. If there are a few more details over on the Instagram site, you'll find it easily enough at the Intercooler. But yeah, I mean, this is an important thing for both of us. I owe my start in this industry to winning a writing competition for young writers. It was a Motorsport News one, looking for a young rally journalist. The competition only ran once, and I won it. But it was a big help up, and it got me doing work for Motorsport News and Autosport when I was 18 or 19. And that was enough to demonstrate that I was enthusiastic enough, that I had a bit of experience, that I could write, so that when a job was advertised on a magazine, I had enough of a CV to go and apply for it and get the gig. So that was my route into the industry, but it would have happened without that competition.
No, and that's the thing, isn't it? You have to find a way of making a CV stand out. And goodness, if you've been published, if you've won something, if your work has been recognized by some people or some body that is itself, credible, that is often the difference, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So yeah, get your entries in.
Get your entries in. Yeah, we're looking forward to reading them. Okay, I just want to ask you briefly about your Caterham. You've written about it a few times on the app. Some wonderful pieces about it, actually. But have you been using it recently?
Well, I did. The weekend just passed was meant to be. So me and a few motoring journalist mates of my generation rather than you, every year we go off and depending on who's hosting, they come to me or I go to their houses or whatever, and we all turn up in silly old cars and spend a couple of days hooning about, having a good time. Very sadly, because one of us has had a family member get ill, not able to do it this weekend. We'll reschedule it, and I'll look forward to doing that. But I was kind of in Caterham mode, and I just thought, well, I'm not just going to leave it in the shed. And so I did what I always sort of do, and I've never ever regretted it. I set an alarm for 5 o'clock. I hadn't driven the Caterham in the actual pitch black because I've only had the car through the summer, and my early morning drives and those have been daylight. So I wanted to see what that was like. And I just got in it I was probably in the car and on my way by 5:30 in the morning, and I just drove it out to the mountains for, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours on my own on totally empty, beautiful roads. And I don't know, I couldn't just sitting there thinking, I'm not sure there's anything I'd rather be in. I'm not sure how I can see how you could go much faster because it's not a particularly powerful car. It's only got 135 horsepower. But I just couldn't really see how within the context of what you can safely do on a public road, how you could have much more fun than that. Just sit there, and the noise and the immediacy and the gear change and the steering, and this is just a silly old Caterham. It's a 1997 car, I think. As I said, without a particularly powerful engine, but it just made me very, very, very happy. And so I got to, I don't know, well, if anyone listen to this goes climbing in the beacons, you'll know Story Arms and the base of where most people set off to climb up Penny Fan. And so I sort of marched up to the top of Penny Fan, took a photograph of myself at the top, came back down again, got in the Caterham, and actually surprisingly, because by this stage it was sort of like, it was completely light, it was probably 9-10 o'clock, had another quite good run home. And yeah, I mean, sort of by the time most people are settling into their cornflakes, I just had this fantastic experience. Just this wonderful, and you and I are so lucky. We get to go to so many places and do so much stuff in such amazing cars. But I don't really think that any of it has made me happier. And that's, let's face it, what it's all about. It's just about the smile on your face than just hooning around Wales on wonderful deserted roads in my own car, making wonderful noises. That's the car, not me. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a simple pleasure, isn't it? I mean, there's really very little to talk about because it's not like, I was, with anybody else or, had any particular destination in mind. Although, when I did get there, I went up a mountain because I thought, well, why wouldn't you? It was just driving for the sake of driving. It was just driving for sheer pleasure. And, I think so many people do it the other way around. Like, you know, they think, oh, well, we've got this journey, we've got to go and see, you know, Auntie Jo wherever, and so we've got to go there at this particular time. How can we enjoy this drive? Well, we could take the old car and maybe figure out a bit of a route or something, and that's how people. I don't do that. I just think I want to go and drive a car. So what can I do to do that? Okay, our first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get up really early. And I'm just going to do that, and you never regret it. You know, have a snooze in the afternoon, make up the, you know, if you lose some sleep, get the time back. And, you know, I'm lucky as you are to live quite close to some decent roads, and just go and drive for the sake of it. You know, if you are adapting your drive to something that you've already got to do, it's always going to be compromised. But if you're just driving for the pleasure of it, let us say, for instance, for one reason or whatever, you get completely held up by something, turn around. Turn right, turn left, take another road, doesn't matter, because you're not going anywhere. You're just driving for pleasure. And it makes me very happy. So there you go. So I did drive the Caterham, and it is good. Fabulous.
There's definitely something in that, driving without a specific destination or a time limit even in mind.
Yeah.
It is wonderful. It makes such a difference. You just sort of choose where you go. You think, oh, well, I'll go over that way this time. I've not tried this route before. And somehow it feels totally different to driving with a destination in mind. It's liberating. Yeah, it's brilliant. I do love that. Good. Well, yeah, I mean, you're a lucky boy to have a Caterham in the shed, able to pull it out when the weather's good and you feel like a drive. I mean, that's
but it's not like, you know, it's a 620S or anything. It's not like a, you know, a 50, 60. You know, it's a very affordable car. You know, I'm lucky. It's, you know, it's a nice car, and you know, and it's in good nick and everything else. But you know, this is, you know, this is not massive money. This is, you know, very small hot hatch money. And you can have a thing which is more rewarding than any number on those sorts of roads than any number of hypercars. You know, you know, you can be on there with 1,000 horsepower and not have as much fun as I had with 135, and I absolutely mean that. Yeah,
they're great things, aren't they? Okay, all right. Well, talking of 1,000 horsepower, to finish this podcast off, we haven't, across all of TI, we haven't even mentioned the Porsche Mission R concept, which emerged at the recent motor show in Munich, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing that I think we should discuss. It's actually it is a concept car. It previews a one-make racing car that Porsche is supposedly going to get on the racetracks in 25, but it's all electric. So people think it actually previews an electric Cayman several years down the road, presumably. But technically it's quite interesting, I suppose. I mean, we'll come to how interesting an electric racing series is, and how many people, particularly a customer series, how many people want to do that? I don't know, there must be some, but it can't be too many. So this thing has twin electric motors. It's actually a Taycan powertrain, more or less, so using the motors at least. 603 horsepower in sort of normal mode, up to 1,073 in qualifying trim. So yeah, I mean, staggering numbers. We're just used to those numbers now, though, aren't we? From any sort of high performance electric car. It's got an 80 to 85 kilowatt hour battery, and it weighs around 1,500 kilograms.
I mean, sorry.
So yeah, I mean, it's probably about the similar amount, actually, I suppose, to a Cayman, but it's a racing car rather than a road car. So what does that tell us a road car might weigh? What, another 100, 200 kilos more, something like that?
Might do. But I mean, this is all quite a long way away, isn't it? You know, they're talking about racing it in, I think, 26. So it's still 5 years out. I think it's a really interesting thing. I think that, you know, what interests me is that Porsche has no intention of. So the point about the car and the way that it's spec'd is they want it to lap at about the same sort of speed as a Carrera Cup car. And so that made me think, oh, it's going to replace Carrera Cup. But Porsche says that they have no intention of that. They said they'll race Carrera Cup for as long as they possibly can. And now that series, is it all Carrera Cup runs or just Super Cup? Can't remember. But anyway, they now use synthetic fuel. in Carrera Cup. So, it is a lot greener than it was. I think the point about it, and particularly talking about your idea of, how interested will people be in an all-electric series, I think at a certain level, it won't be drivers so much as sponsors. There will be, it's all about companies who wish to have a presence in motorsport, but also wishing to be seen to be putting their environmental good citizen, credentials to the fore. And even with synthetic fuel, I suspect there's going to come a time when sponsoring stuff with internal combustion engines is just going to fall out of fashion. And then, well, what do you have? Well, you have a car here which looks amazing. It's just as quick as a cup car, and yet it is environmentally saintly. And I think that's the sell. I think that's the pitch. And I mean, for myself, I'd find that more interesting than Formula E. I just would. Particularly if, as appears to be the case, it's based on the next generation pure EV Cayman and Boxster. I think it has a relevance and an interest there that Formula E just isn't going to have. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it is interesting. I'm still struggling to get excited about electric racing. I saw that somebody had an all-electric track day. I don't know if you read that. No. And people were going around not just in sort of Taycans, but they were going around in ID3s and that sort of thing. And fair enough. I'll be interested to see if they have another. I mean, you can shout and scream, can't you? But that's the world we are moving towards. Yeah. And we are going to have to find a way of deriving some kind of enjoyment from it. So, I welcome it. I think the Mission R, I think it's interesting. I understand why they're doing it. Does it thrill me to my bones? Not yet. But the world will seem a very different place in 25, 26. And there won't be as many alternatives, and there will be many other more cars like it. We will have come to accept it and be used to it in a way we just aren't at the moment. Interesting car.
Yeah, they're targeting 40-minute races, which is, I think that's quite good.
That's about what it is. That sounds to me like longer than a Carrera Cup race, or maybe about the same time period.
Yeah, so it's not exactly Mickey Mouse 10-15 minute thing, is it? So yeah, I mean, if they're able to achieve that, then crack on. Yeah, good. Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave that episode of the podcast there. Remember to rate and review the podcast, please. That does make a big difference. And go and check out the Intercooler app as well. Just download it, start your free trial. Yeah, you'll like it. We think it's good.
Can I just? I should have done this at the start. Can I just do a quick shout out for a character called Dan Jackson, who contacted me on Instagram saying, why haven't you done anything on the Mission R? We should have done, and we have now. So thank you, Dan.
Yep, box ticked. Okay, thank you, everybody. And as ever, we'll be back to talk to you again next week.
Look forward to it. All the best.